Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always a pleasure to rise on behalf of the people from Kamloops, Thompson Nicola. And I must say, whenever we hear, when shall the bill be read the next time, I think this is the first time I've ever heard in this House that it be said now. And I think that I hear the member from Winnipeg chuckling, and I think he's probably a bit disappointed that he didn't get that extra word enhancered. So if it was recorded, perhaps it could be attributed to him by the verification desk. We all know he likes to speak in this House just as I do. In fact, we should all appreciate speaking in this place. I was reflecting not long ago about this, about how much of an honor it is to be here. And let's face it, whenever you have a job, you will have people who take different degrees of interest in their job. And for me, the ability to stand here on the green carpet of the House of Commons as somebody who grew up as the child of immigrants in a very middle-class home. My dad was a sawmill worker. My mom was a stay-at-home mom until I was about 10, the last child when she went back to school to become a legal assistant. And ultimately, I became a lawyer. So we see kind of this going through full circle. So the ability to stand up here in the House of Commons is not something we should ever underestimate, regardless of which side of the aisle we're on. Now, if I could amplify that even more, thank my colleagues on the government benches. If I could amplify that point even more, Mr. Speaker, it's an even greater honor when we have what we call private members' bills or private members' business. And I experienced this firsthand last time through Bill C-225, which was an amendment to the criminal code in the last Parliament to change the name of child pornography to child sexual abuse and exploitation material. I wrote that bill, and it was then shepherded by the member from what is now Kamloops, Shuswap, Central Rockies. And I've got my criminal code here, and I'm not using it as a prop, I promise you. But one of the things here in my 2026 criminal code that I could say is that this language has now been adopted to reflect the fact that we are no longer using that antiquated language. And it is against that backdrop that I rise here today. I thank everybody here for allowing this matter to proceed past a report stage without the necessity for a standing vote so that we could get to third reading now. I'm optimistic and hopeful that debate could perhaps collapse so that we could be voting on this bill as soon as Wednesday or even today. But hope springs eternal, they might say. Colloquially, this is called Bailey's Law, Bill C-225. This was the first private member's bill that's been brought forward in this Parliament for debate, and it's my honor to stand here before you. Bailey McCourt was I believe she was in her mid-30s, and her abuser was convicted of assaulting her, of choking her, and I believe of threatening her. 3 hours after he was convicted, free on bail, he killed her. That matter remains before the court, so he is obviously accused at this time, but I don't believe there's any dispute as to who the assailant was. The question of his guilt in a court of law will have to be for another day. But for context, I had actually written this bill about 2 or 3 years ago. And as most people know, I was a lawyer before I came to this place. I guess I'll be a lawyer after I leave this place. But one of the things that really bothered me was that we treat assault the same way, regardless of context, mostly. So for instance, assault in the criminal code is under section 266. Whether you beat your intimate partner or beat somebody up at the bar, it's the same charge. Now, there is one exception that we used to look at a lot, which was assault peace officer. Assaulting a peace officer was different. So the law certainly recognizes that sometimes things should be different. Well, I thought it should be different for assaulting an intimate partner. Intimate partners, they are within a relationship of trust, often financial dependence. It's not uncommon for one intimate partner to make vastly more money, well, at times of separation or at times of potential separation. That can really be exploitative. There is a spiritual dependence oftentimes and just a general codependence. So that was something that really bothered me, and that's why I had written a version of this bill in, I believe it was 2023 or 2024. The bill never got tabled, and then after Bailey was killed in early July of 2025, the NDP Premier called for, NDP Premier of British Columbia called for the making or the killing of an intimate to be first-degree murder. And I thought, well, as a Conservative, if the NDP Premier is asking for this, perhaps this is somewhere where we can find common ground. So that's why I put this bill forward. I want to recognize a number of people who've been impacted by Bailey's tragic killing. Let's not forget her children. Carrie Weeb was present in the car when Bailey was killed. I sent her a message today just giving her an update. We can't forget Bailey's family, Mother Karen, Father Shane, stepmom Trish, sister Paige, Aunt Debbie. Sometimes we just see things and they're in the news and we become detached from them. One thing that I enjoy about this job that is challenging, that I think every member here feels, is that when they do deal with somebody, whether it be on an immigration matter, a taxation matter, or in this case, a matter of crime, that they are personally touched. And I can say this is something, when you look somebody in the eye, they do personally touch you. You look at people like Flo and Paul, who appeared at committee, and you look at when you hear them speak about their daughter and about her tragic killing as well at the hands of an intimate partner, it really crystallizes within me the necessity for us to challenge the status quo sometimes. And the law evolves, and the law should evolve, and sometimes it has to evolve more drastically. In fact, the last time I think the law evolved on the principle or on the issue of intimate partner violence was likely in the early 1980s, when an exception to the law of sexual assault with respect to one's spouse was taken out. And rightfully so. A person can sexually assault their spouse. It happens far too often. So I'm very proud to be standing before Parliament today with, I believe, the support of all parties. We received all party support at second reading, and I hope we will have all party support at third reading to make the most substantial change to the law of intimate partner violence thus far in Canadian history. Mr. Speaker, it's important as well that we work together. One of the things that I often tell people, you know, they do see us, and they see us oftentimes being pugilistic or combative, and there is a time and a place to be oppositional. I am a member of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition, and that is a role I take very seriously. Without an opposition, and without a meaningful opposition, I believe that democracy is imperiled. So there is a time to protest, there is a time to debate, there is a time to oppose, and there is a time to question. Questioning is fine. In fact, questioning is vital to a robust democracy. I hope that if I am ever on the government benches, we have a meaningful opposition. This is one reason why I often take such issue with time allocation and closure and things like that when we've barely discussed a bill. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to stand before Parliament on this issue. So what does this bill do? And sorry, and I should return. I was talking about the opposition and why that's important. Well, one of the things people may or may not realize is if they were to look at this bill before report stage or before committee at second reading and after committee, they will see a substantially different bill, and that's okay. In fact, when we work together and make bills better, that is a good thing. And I can say that as sponsor of this bill, I believe that we have made this bill better. I believe that in working with the Minister's office and with my staff, we have made the bill better. This may be the last time I get to speak on this bill, so I will thank my staff, Stephanie Rennick, Jesus Bondo, Rofi Agbula, all of them helping out and working with the Minister's staff, and I would like to thank the Minister's staff who have been more than accommodating in meeting with us in order to address this bill. So what does this bill do? This bill makes major changes to a homicide of an intimate. If a homicide now occurs of an intimate partner, that homicide will now be first-degree murder if there is a pattern of coercion or control, or if this occurs during coercion or control. And when I say this being a homicide, manslaughter of an intimate partner will now have to be considered as to whether a life sentence should be imposed. So a life sentence in Canada is imposed mandatorily for murder, generally, first degree, second degree. The question becomes one of parole ineligibility. So we call that a minimum sentence of life. Well, there's actually a maximum sentence for life. A lot of people don't know this. You can go to jail for life for breaking into someone's home. That is the maximum sentence a court can impose. The court doesn't have to impose that, but it can. And a court can impose a maximum sentence for manslaughter as well, of life. I'll tell you this, Mr. Speaker, I was a parole officer in my early 20s, and I've worked in the justice system for a long time. The last time I saw a life sentence imposed for manslaughter was 1972. That is a long time ago. And yet, what we see is we see intimate partner violence continuing to be a scourge on our society. So maybe it's high time we address sentencing. One of the things I've taken issue with this government is its sentencing of sexual offenses, particularly sexual offenses against children. The way we as society and the way we as Parliament reflect our difficulty or our issue with a crime should be in part based on sentencing. The more repugnant the crime, the stricter the sentence. Now, we call that in some cases denunciation. That's what talks about in Section 718 of the Criminal Code. Sometimes we talk about deterrence, making the law so bad that people don't want to do it, or making a sentence so bad that people will think twice before they do it. But in a lot of respects, sometimes we just have to say it like it is. This is happening far too often. Too many intimates are dying. This is flying under the radar far too often, unreported or underreported. So we need to make changes. So often in intimate partner violence, we call it the cycle of violence. And it continues on and on and on and on. In Bailey's case, this was a cycle of violence. As I recall, there were breaches involved. She was previously victimized by this offender. Mr. Speaker, it is time to stop the cycle of violence. We need a paradigm shift in this country on this issue, and I hope that Bill C-225 will do that. Mr. Speaker, I have my colleague here. She will be speaking on my behalf here. Or pardon me, she'll be speaking on behalf of the party seconder from Langley Cloverdale. I want to thank the member for Langley Cloverdale. She gave up her spot in the order of precedence so that we could speak to this bill sooner. When we have a team effort like this, when we have members like the member from Cloverdale who gave up her spot selflessly in order to have Bailey's Law advance sooner on third reading, that is how we get things done. I'm incredibly indebted to that member. I'm indebted to every member who has spoken on this from our benches, who has supported this, who has met with the family. Let's get this bill passed. Let's get it passed right now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, there's no doubt the members brought forward substantive legislation. And because of the processing of legislation for private members' hour, we're actually at a point in which, whether it's this hour or one more hour of debate after this hour, that we'll actually have a vote on a substantial piece of legislation. And first, I would recognize the member bringing forward the legislation bringing it to committee, and it was really important that we saw parties working together so that everyone could feel comfortable in ultimately seeing this legislation as it is today. And I'm wondering if he could provide his thoughts in terms of his feelings with respect to the committee process and the contributions that were made at committee.
Member for Kamloops, Thompson-Nicola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his contribution and for his question. Obviously, sometimes we do have our disagreements in this House, and I think that that's actually healthy in this place. So, in direct response to his question, the committee process was actually very meaningful, and for those who might not know, committees where we study the bill. And when we got to committee, we as Conservatives had agreed to a number of amendments. There were a number of stakeholders who had spoken loudly and clearly on this issue. I know that my Bloc colleagues had thoughts. I know that my Liberal colleagues had thoughts, and the NDP colleagues had thoughts. But the fact that we were able to synthesize all of those thoughts so quickly into amendments was very meaningful. I believe it was 2.5 meetings, 3 meetings that this was a committee for such a lengthy piece of legislation. Normally private members' bills are a lot shorter, so the committee process went as it should, smoothly.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Shefford. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague from Kamloops, Thompson, for tabling this bill. And I've had the opportunity to work with him at the Standing Committee of the Status of Women. And we have seen that there were amendments that when we studied them at committee, but I'd like to hear what he thinks about the notion of the importance of recognizing coercive control. And it was part of the discussions we heard at committee. And how is better recognition of coercive control improving things? What could it change for victims?
The Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson-Nicola.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I say to my Bloc colleague, merci pour votre question. This is actually a very important question. This House voted, and I believe unanimously in the last Parliament, on a bill from NDP member Laurel Collins on coercive control, and I believe it died on the order paper when the election was called. Coercive control is part of that cycle of violence, Mr. Speaker, that I just referred to. It's something that goes on and on. It is a part of that violence. Intimate partner violence generally doesn't just come out of nowhere. There are precursors, there are antecedents that happen. And the coercive control is central to that. It is part of that dependence, that often financial dependence that we see, that psychological manipulation. So it's very important that this House recognize the role of coercive control in criminality. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I spoke with Bailey's grandmother, who lives in my riding, who heartbrokenly told me that she was with Bailey the day she was born for her first breath, and was with her when she had her last breath. And just wonder if the member could tell us that how can we as legislatures justify not strengthening protections for victims through measures like Bailey's Law to ensure that dangerous offenders are not given opportunities to reoffend and murder an intimate partner?
The Honourable for Kamloops, Thompson-Nicola.
I thank my honourable colleague from Maple Ridge for his speech, for his question. My deepest condolences, obviously, to Bailey's grandmother. I actually wasn't aware of her being present for her first and final breath. Very difficult to hear. The first thing in answer to his question that we have to address is that there is a problem. If we are unprepared in this House to say intimate partner violence is a problem, if we are unprepared to say we have to deal with this, then we have an even bigger problem. This is the first step in addressing. Thank you.